Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Headhunter Hideout. Super excited today. I think I say that every single time. Super excited.
It's good to be excited about everything. Life is good.
I'm always excited when, for some reason, I get a big boost of energy on LinkedIn Live. But anyway, welcome to the show, Cameron. For anyone who doesn't know, I put a post out a couple days ago. Hopefully you saw it. But Cameron has a extensive background in the Air Force. And he had a ton of roles in the Air Force and really grew in leadership, but ended up doing some recruiting and was kind of leading the talent efforts. And now he is working for, what's your full-time job? It's working for the National Guard in California.
California Air National Guard, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. But also on the side as well, he's started a podcast around recruiting and kind of similar to, I guess, what we're doing, but just having more conversations about recruiting and so we're super excited to have Cameron here, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. He when did we connect on the phone? Was that probably a month ago now?
Probably about a month ago, yeah.
Well, Cameron's a great guy, so if you're not connected with him, definitely connect up. But yeah, man, I appreciate you joining the show, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how you fell in recruiting yourself. I know no one ever really plans on it, but it's obviously something you're really passionate about and you're really great at. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you just got into the recruiting gig or recruiting game.
So I was stationed in Arkansas, Little Rock. For all my Arkansas folks, and I was in my old job, in logistics, pretty much in the Air Force, and pretty much I don't want to say getting bored, but I really felt like I had kind of done a lot of the things that we could do in that career field. And I remember I talked to, they're called career field managers. They're people who, manage a career field. And I said, you know what, I really like to do something different. And he said, well, the Air Force is coming out with a new program about, it's called the Special Duty Program. And so you should apply for it. And I said, all right, cool. And so I applied for it. Yeah, I mean, I was like, I should be a recruiter. And so, when it first came out, they put us all around a table and they said, all right, we got to give up 6 bodies. We got to give up 6 names. And I said, I'll put my name in the hat, man. Like, I'll go do something different. And, and they said, all right, what's your order? And I said, I'll be a recruiter. I'll be a military training leader, which is somebody who, I guess in essence is like a guidance counselor for people while they're learning their job when they first join the Air Force. And then I would be like a BMT instructor, so like a drill sergeant. And cool. So, that was at the bottom of my list because I'm like, I can't see myself yelling at people all day. so I got recruiting, obviously. And it's been a journey, man. I went to Louisiana for my first about 3.5 years of recruiting. It was amazing. It's funny enough, it was number 28 on my list of locations to go to. It was amazing. That's where I met the co-host of our podcast, Roy. And after that, I went on to do health professions. So doctors, nurses, dentists, pretty much anything under that medical umbrella. I was recruiting for the Air Force active duty.
Cool.
And I'm originally from California, and pretty much we came home on vacation and our family was like, hey, it'd be really nice if you guys could be closer because we were all the way in Pennsylvania. Sure. And so I actually left active duty and came to the California Air National Guard to be a recruiter for them. And but I've loved recruiting since the day I got into it. So I've done Roy and myself have kind of done everything we can to learn all the different facets of it. Like I told you earlier, we call you guys civilian recruiters. And so, I talked to you as many as I could when we were at fairs or career fairs, school fairs, what have you. And I really started diving into it probably about the last 1.5 years, where I started following people like yourself, seeing the things that you guys are doing, learning your lessons, reading articles that you guys are reading, and just really try and soak up the culture because in the military, like as everybody knows, we have the way that we do things and we have a structure and stuff like that. And it's nice. It's refreshing to talk to kind of almost like another facet of recruiting where you learn all these different tools and trades. And then also, we have to leave the military at some point. So why not know how the civilian world works?
Super smart, man. And so with With the podcast that's starting up, tell me a little bit about the kind of the goal of the podcast, what you guys are doing and where you'd like to see it grow. And,
Yeah.
even for different people who are out there as well, like what types of guests you typically look for.
So Roy and I started the podcast because we literally just talk about recruiting every time we talk. People always say like, don't talk about work when you're at home, man. But it's literally all we talk about. But it's not a drudging thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a motivating thing, and we love it, and it brings us, it brings us happiness, it brings us joy, sadness. When he's like, man, because he's a supervisor. I'm a recruiter. He's a recruiting supervisor, and so he'll tell me about the things that he sees in the field, and he's like, I don't know why they did this, and I'm like, because it's just the way of the world, man. Like you got to learn. And I was like, we should do a podcast. Like there's definitely people out here who are having these conversations that we're having, especially in the Air Force recruiting. And I said it'd probably be nice for them to hear a voice in that manner. And so Roy is the thinker. I'm more of like let's just do it. And if we fall on our face, then the face we fall on, bro. And so that it is what it is. And so I told him we should do a podcast. He's like, oh yeah, cool, we'll do it. And then I started the Facebook page, ordered my mic, started the YouTube page. And I said, hey, by the way, we're recording the first episode on Wednesday. And he's like, what? And I was like, yep. So order your mic, bro. And so that's kind of where it started. And then, we have tried to, as much as we are obviously military recruiters, we're trying to keep the show as neutral as possible. So though we have had many military guests, we do actually try and have more civilian guests, who are recruiters, or at least people who were military recruiters who have now crossed over to be civilian recruiters, just to really kind of speak to the audience. We would like this show to be for everybody. Obviously, we know, though, that with our limited experience in the civilian sector, that's obviously probably the demographic that's going to take the most work to bring in. But that's why we also bring the guests, because then we kind of talk, not at each other, but it's like, hey, I'm in the military. This is how we do it. How do you, God damn it. How do you guys do it? and so I talk with my hands.
Yeah. You're just not in an aggressive way, just punching the mic,
And so yeah, man. So that's kind of, and then obviously with where it's going to go, anywhere, sky's the limit, man. When we started it, I made sure I said, we're not doing this for a money grab or for a social media grab. Like we should do this to not only inform people, but just because it's something we love. It's a passion project, 100% passion project. And so it's the, sky's the limit type thing. We've got some great guests and we keep getting more guests. I'm sure you'll be a guest at some point here soon. And then, yeah, man. So, and then it's kind of cool because it's also allowed us an avenue to connect with people like yourself. One of our guests, Ben Levitt, he's a big YouTuber, Instagrammer guy who talked about social media and recruiting and stuff. Cool. He said it best. He was like, it's a lot weirder to call somebody and say, hey, man, let me get your phone number. And so we can just talk, and rather than, hey, why don't you should come on my podcast and we can talk about what you do and how you do it and stuff like that. And though, people like yourself, obviously, and myself are really big, we will give you my phone number and we can talk on the phone. Not everybody's like that, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I just want to shout out a couple people. We got Newman on here, just said, welcome to all members. We got Gina. You said, hi, Joel. Hi, Gina. And then let's see who else we have here. Alfaya Khalid. Hello, sir. So yeah, anybody, if you are out there and you've got questions about recruiting or questions, even just about like the differences between civilian recruiting and recruiting for the armed forces, which it means I think there's a lot of differences. But I think I had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and they were a military recruiter, and they were trying to get a job as a civilian recruiter, and they were having a tough time. So I'm curious to hear from, I guess, your point of view. What do you see as being like a major challenge or something that would, someone's coming out of military recruiting and they wanted to transition into civilian recruiting? Like, what's your advice for people? What are the challenges? And are you kind of advising them to go on like the corporate recruiting side, or are you like, yeah, you know what, you would be good in agency recruiting? Like, what are those conversations like?
So, as we've started to kind of do the podcast and as you see, like build my LinkedIn profile and stuff like that. I've been hit up by a lot of recruiters recently that kind of ask those same questions. And, I always tell them, hey, I'm learning just like you are. Obviously, I've probably had more conversations than you've had with, the civilian networks and things like that. But I would say the biggest thing that I have seen is a difference in sourcing. So, which obviously, as a recruiter in the civilian sector, like that's your bread and butter is how do you source? What tools do you use? That is, I would say, the biggest difference because, in military recruiting, we have a lot of these things at our fingertips. Like, most people who contact us, what they call them a warm lead, right? Like somebody who's already interested, they've already kind of read online about what there is to offer. You're more so just kind of a validation point and or to bring other benefits to the table, right? I would say when health professions recruiting, that was probably the closest I would say you can get to the type of recruiting they do in the civilian sector because you are sourcing, you're using school lists to contact doctors, you're using, association lists and things like that. But I would say that's the biggest one because, the phone calls that we get a lot more phone calls, I would say, than probably the average civilian recruiter does, and so that can make you comfortable, I would say. So I will say, as I've learned more and more about the civilian sector, even taking more of a dive into how recruiting is done there, doing sourcing and things like that. Like, man, this is pretty extreme. Like I feel for my civilian counterparts. Now the positive side of that though, is that we as military recruiters, we're not afraid of the phones and we're not afraid of follow-ups. So, that was the biggest thing when I talked to one of our guests on our show, was he said, you guys don't care about getting on the phone. He's like, you'll call anybody and you'll talk their ear off. He's like, and the valuable follow-up, you're most, in his words, most was it corporate recruiters, they're not good at follow-ups. They're like one and done. They're like, okay, they're not, they didn't answer my email.
It's basically like go for the low-hanging fruit. And exactly. You want to just find people. A lot of times it's like the first person that talks to you, they're like the best client. They're the best candidate you've ever seen. It's like, no.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a good point. That's a good point.
So that's one of the things he said, and like, that was the biggest thing is that, so if I was to say selling point, those are the two biggest selling points I think I've seen, which can make the biggest difference is you're not afraid of the phone and you understand the value of follow-up, the fact that you can email somebody or text message somebody multiple times and you might get them on the third time, not the first time.
What about like the sales process in terms of getting people, we'll approach it from two sides. Like the first side would be, you've got somebody that's interested potentially. Yeah. I mean, to me, like there's this difference in selling somebody and like, okay, you're going to be serving, for a good amount of time compared to, hey, I got a potential job offer. There's a big difference between the two. To me, there's probably a really decent amount of like convincing people and like walking them through like the emotions of like, okay, this is what you're committing to. You got to work with the families. I'm sure like, you have a great conversation. They go home and they talk to whoever their parents and their parents like, no, we don't want you to do this.
Definitely.
So like, how do you think that, and then on the other side, I guess would be on the business development side on like a civilian agency. Like if you go work at an agency, you've got to find those clients. You got that sales process. Yeah. So those are two different types of sales process. Do you see that it's a good, like that type of sales process is a great training for the business development, or that's another stepping stone that somebody would have to learn in exiting into like civilian recruiting? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so I would say, we have to deal with probably some of the, in my opinion, some of the hardest objections that people have to, which is emotional objections, right? Because it's like, oh, like my family doesn't want me to do this, or I'm scared, like, and granted, those things, of course, are prevalent in the civilian sector as well. But it's a whole lot different when people think of the commitment in a lot different way. You take $100,000 salary from a company. Most of the time you can leave after a year if you really want to. Like, you take your 100 after the year you've worked there and you're like, okay, you know what? I don't like it here anymore. I can leave. That's, I would say, is kind of the biggest stepping stone that we run into a lot as people, don't want to commit. And at that point, it's really about jumping over that hurdle in essence of it. You commit to something every single day of your life. If you commit to go to college for 6 years, you just did the exact same thing as if you would have joined the military, except you're paying them. You're not actually paying us. And so I think in that retrospect, it helps a lot of recruiters, and it would help them in the civilian sector because they think of those out of box ways to handle objections.
100%.
It's not your direct kill where, someone's like, hey, John, you have to take, 90,000, which is, it's not the 100,000 you wanted, but they're going to give you a 15% bonus instead of a 10% bonus. That's, in my opinion, that's an easier kill than saying, hey man, look, like, do you really want to go try out college for 6 years, or would you rather the military pay for your college, send you to training, pay you while you're doing so, and you could have the potential to live in another country, But those are just things that some people don't understand until they're framed work in a way where it's presented in that fashion. And I think as military recruiters, we have that advantage because we know how to frame things, in a bow tie, I guess you would say.
Well, Tom just said, he said, my experience with military recruiters is the great ones have mastered the what's in it for me, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then he goes on to say they do a great job of not making it about them. The company, it's about what makes sense for the candidate, listening to what they want out of career life and advising them on how the military can fit in. Which is, it's what you're saying. And I think that skill, in civilian recruiting is huge too, because, once you get past the more money or maybe the title increase, it then becomes about how is this position going to, maybe increase your skills, increase your abilities, increase the amount that you can handle, and how is that going to benefit you in the future? And so it is really being able to get to that core of how is this actually going to benefit you in the long run. But I think the last person I talked to about this that was having an issue, I think the issue that they had was, landing that first recruiting job. And I think there is, I think with people who are into civilian recruiting, maybe there's like ideas that they have of military recruiting. So like, what advice do you give to people when they're trying to like knock down the doors? Like how are you saying that they approach that conversation with a corporate recruiter or an agency recruiter owner? Like what's your biggest piece of advice to someone that's maybe struggling to make that switch?
Honestly, their network. And honestly, that's with every military person, realistically. I'll be honest, I made a post the other day and I tried to tag, fellow recruiters and some other military people, and I found literally 10% of them on LinkedIn. And I think I even messaged them and I said, I'm not trying to be like, I'm not in your business, but man, if there's anything I'm learning, you got to start now. You can't start building your network 6 months out from when you're going to retire, man. Like you got to build your network now, learn these skills now, and I think you made a post today about like, everybody's giving out job tips. Everybody's giving out hiring tips, and granted everybody is, but those are valuable things that people who don't have any experience can really take value from, especially for us in the military. And so, that's my biggest thing is I tell them you need to get on LinkedIn and you need to build your network because as you know, employers look at those things too. What are you doing in your sector? If you just say you're a good recruiter, but your network is not great, you never comment about recruiting, but you're writing these things on paper that say, yeah, I'm very passionate and I love recruiting. Does that really show that you love recruiting or that you're passionate about it? And so as much as people may not like social media, and I guess in LinkedIn, I would consider it that it's the way of the land right now, and you just got you get in or you get in with it or you don't get a job, I guess.
Well, yeah, and it's for a lot of people who are on the job search anyway. It's being able to connect with people who are in your industry. And real quick here, Ryan just said, "Hey, buddy, just checking in." I think, but hey, Ryan, good to see you. Good to see everybody that's out there. But yeah, I think that to me too, it's like my advice to everybody is, even if you're in a job that you're happy in right now, you should just be networking. It doesn't have to be on LinkedIn necessarily. LinkedIn, I just think provides probably the easiest way to connect with people because you can just start commenting you can start trying to connect with them. And if you're in a job that's stable, or like, which really no job is, it's like now is the time to be able to do that. And so I think that's great advice, particularly if you're in the military and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be exiting out in whatever, a year's time. A year's a great amount of time to be able to map out what are the industries that I want to get into. And, and those are proactive things that you can say when you're out and you're having those interviews and say, look, yeah, I get it. There's a difference. I'm going to maybe need some training on certain aspects, but here's what I've been doing in the meantime. I've connected with, 400 or 500 industry professionals in construction or healthcare. And I think that goes a long way to showing, okay, you know how to connect with people. You're thinking strategically, as opposed to, I think a big challenge is for anyone. I mean, if you've been doing recruiting in the military for years, man, it's tough when you get out there and you may be met with like an agency recruiter or a corporate recruiter, and they're like, yeah, it's just different, and it doesn't really count. Which can be how people can approach some of those situations as well. And I think, but if you're able to counteract that and say, yep, I get that, like there's differences, but here's the value that I can bring, and here's what I've been doing. That's huge. So tell me a little bit about like we were talking about this a little bit offline, but I'd love to hear like kind of your vision for like what you see as far as, recruitment agency and kind of some of your, I don't know, just kind of some of your vision for how you'd like to help the industry and what you'd like to be involved in and how you see yourself helping people long term.
Yeah. And so I feel like when I say it, I probably sound like every new recruiter that's coming into to business. But, one of the things that has made me very successful is my constant communication with my recruits, as well as honestly just my bare bones on my honesty. Like I just, to the point where, I've had people who have heard me talk to somebody and they're just like, man, like they don't get mad at you or anything. I'm like, no, because they know that if I'm telling you this, there's a reason behind it. Like they know that there's no, blown smoke anywhere, and there's no dishonesty. If I don't think it's going to help you, I'm just going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you your resume is great if your resume is trash. I mean,
That's good. Yeah.
I was recruiting doctors and nurses and stuff like that, and so, but it was an application process. So even if I got them all the way through the process, they still had to be selected by the military. And so I'm like, look, man, I'm not telling you this to be a jerk. I'm telling you this because I want to get you selected. You really want to do all this work just to have nothing happen. Yeah. And so, that's really kind of a vision I think Roy and I have for, our agency is we would like to, I guess the hot word on the block is boutique. So but in retrospect, it's, obviously everybody wants to have a big, agency and things like that, but I don't want to have something so big where I lose focus and I lose touch with what's not only going on with the industry, but what's going on with our clients and our candidates, and so, and if it does get to a point where things get big, I want to have a stable enough network where I can still be in the loop with what's going on and what is prevalent and what is a good thing and what is a bad thing. And I don't want it to just be numbers. I hate that. And I think, like I said, I think most people probably say that, but I hate when we turn ourselves and our people just into numbers. And I think it's really kind of, SITTY. So like, and so
that's what our industry has somewhat become. And it's always, I think it's in any type of business. Yeah. Sometimes maybe people start off with the right intentions. Yeah. And it's easy for goals to change, but sure. I think it doesn't mean that in starting out or wanting to grow something, I think those are the right intentions to have, and especially in recruiting, because it's always long term, and you could see short term returns pretty quickly, but in the long term, it's reputation, it's really caring about people, it's having a great conversation with someone and making an impact. And then 20 years from now, when they're in, a huge leadership role, or maybe they've done something incredible, they come back and go, you know what? When I talked to Cameron, I felt like he cared, and I felt like he was out for my, my best interests. And I think to me, like that's the way that you win long term. But short term now, it's like you can play that treadmill game where you're just oh, I got a candidate. Oh, I've got, let me call up 10 potential clients in town. And I think somebody could be a good fit. It's like, you can get the short-term results with that, but eventually, you want those long-term clients, you want those partnerships. And I think you get it with your perspective that you have, which is awesome. And I think, obviously you're doing awesome things because you're building a podcast too, which I love your style of just being like, let's just go for it. Let's just do it. What have you found? I know we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but with the podcast, what do you think has been the biggest surprise that you've found in just trying to start it up and getting guests on? What's been the biggest surprise so far?
How easy it's been. Honestly, honestly, our first guest was SEAC number 3, John Wayne Troxel. So the SEAC is the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So the number one enlisted person in the entire military, and he had just retired. So there's another one in seat right now, but the previous one, he came on the show. Like, he was our first guest, and that was literally just a Facebook message. I follow him on Facebook, and I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, sir, we're doing this podcast. I think you'd be great for it. 38 years in the military, and then you cross over the civilian sector. Why not? People will not want to listen to you?" And so, and then he came on the show. He loved the show, and he said, "Hey, I already got your next guest for you." And I said, I have another guest for you. I said, "Okay, cool." Got us that guest, and then same thing. I hit up Ben Nader. He's another recruiter. And same thing with him. He came on the show, and then he had a guest for us, and then his guest had a guest for us, and then it's just been.
Ben's he's like the 100,000.
The six-figure recruiter.
Six-figure recruiter.
Yeah, six-figure recruiter. Yeah.
Six-figure recruiter sounds a little cooler than the $100,000 recruiter. I've heard him a couple times too, and he's doing some cool stuff with like podcasts and content.
Yeah, and his YouTube page where he outlines everything. He talks about everything he does, and I thought that was really genuine and really cool. And so asked him to come on, and everybody that's come on our show, I think they've been a little weary, to be honest, just because we're not in the civilian sector, so they're like, and that's okay. I totally understand that. They're like, well, what are these guys going to talk about? Like, what's going to happen? But every guest has left with the like, man, you guys are really cool, and we had a great time on your show. I'm going to find you somebody else because I think that this person should be on the show because it was just a good time, and it was really informative, and we laughed, and that's all, like you and I are, go back and forth on comments. It's just to be about being genuine, and that's okay. And we let the show kind of ride where it goes. We have notes that we take, obviously, pre-show to help guide, but honestly, it all comes off conversation. Like, we had a retired chief on, who she's with Arbonne now. And so we asked her about that. Like, what made you get involved in that? Well, the conversation evolved into some other topics where we didn't even plan on it going into those topics, but it ended up being a great show, and people loved it because the authenticity of it. And I'm not saying that having too structured of a show is a bad thing, but ours just works that way. And I think that our fans appreciate it.
Yeah. And it depends on your audience. It depends on the guests that you have as well. Like, I know I've got an upcoming guest, who I just know that we're going to have some structure because it's going to help them. It's going to help them feel comfortable. Exactly. Even though live stream is different to a podcast. Like, obviously live stream, you get away with a little bit more of, hey, let's get on, let's have the conversation. I think with a podcast, it's just knowing like who the guest is and giving them that option and saying, okay, are you structured? Are you more open to something where we just, kind of have the conversation and let it goes. And I know, again, even with the live stream, like, there's definitely people who are like, that does not help me at all. And I need structure. I'm like, okay, well, I want to appreciate that too, because you want people to feel comfortable. But let's, so Rob's got a couple of comments here too. So Rob just said, guest referrals are always excellent. But then he just asked you, so what's listenership? What's the listenership like numbers wise? I think that's a fair question. I don't know if you're open to kind of share how that's been for you.
I mean, It just started. Obviously, we're trying to grow it as much as possible, but I would say each episode's probably on YouTube, averaging roughly 100 to 200 views on each episode, and then our podcast is averaging between 50 and 100 downloads per episode.
Sweet.
You know, it's just we very much want it to be very organic. So we're not spending money on advertising and then things like that. And then as our guest network is building, I think the audience will grow. Like I said, we because of our low amount of experience right now in the civilian sector, that's probably our audience that is the least amount of growing right now. Most of our people who are listening are military recruiters or military related in some fashion. So I think as we build, though, as I come on shows like yours and as we have guests like yourself and other guests on our show, it'll start to build a reputation of, they don't necessarily need to be in the industry to bring valuable information to the industry. And I think that's what the goal is really, is collaboration and really kind of bringing good content that everybody can learn from.
100%. And Rob just said that's excellent for just starting out. And then Tom just said, just add a listener here as well. So there you go. But I think that's someone, again, it was a LinkedIn comment. Somebody had made the point like that one of the biggest mistakes that people make with podcasting is they don't invite like prospects on to do business, which I think like can be a big mistake, or could be. But I think also it's, to me, the best things are always started with like passion and care. So it's the same thing with the recruiting business. Like if your major passion is money, it's just not going to be satisfying. If your major passion is helping people, then you're going to help some amazing people and you're going to make money. So it's the same with a podcast and going, well, you probably are going to get hopefully some business out of it in terms of, maybe some of the guests will turn into clients. Yeah. But it's like that's not the goal. No. And it's super obvious if that is the goal, because then it's like, you just got someone who's just sitting there like bored and you're just asking questions because it's a business development activity. Mm-hmm. But if you're like, obviously, man, you're a super engaging guy and you can tell that you're passionate about all of the topics and the guests. And so that's what wins people over. So it's kind of like a weird dichotomy, because it's the same with creating content in general. Mm-hmm. If you see it as just a way to make business and you don't actually see it as a way to bring value, it doesn't really serve you. For sure. But it does end up being a business driver, because if you are actually out there for the right intentions, people will feel that. So it's But I think the thing I love most is just like your approach to it, where you're like, just send a Facebook message, and then it works out, and but it's like you could maybe send 100 Facebook messages out and not get any responses. So I love that that's how it went, and I'm sure it's like
it's just the telltale. I mean, what's the worst? It's the telltale thing. What's the worst they're gonna say is no, or they don't respond. I've always kind of lived my life like that. Like, a little bit about I'm an only son to a single mother. And I went to a lot of schools growing up, and so it was really like, you show up at a school, I don't have time to spend a year making friends, because I'll be honest, sometimes I spent only a year at a school. So it was like I stepped in the door and I was like, hey, what's up? My name's Cam. What's your name? Do you like Power Rangers? I like Power Rangers.
I still use that. That's still a good opening line.
I like Ninja Turtles. And so, and that's kind of how I ran my life since, it has its trials and tribulations, like because I'm so passionate and because I want to help people so much, even people that may not even want to help themselves. I had a buddy of mine where we were riding in the car one day and I said, man, I wish I could be more like you, man. Just not necessarily all about yourself, but just like care less about if people don't want to be helped, and don't help them. And he's like, bro, the world would burn down if everybody was like me. He's like, we need people like you who are passionate, and it sucks for you. He's like, sorry, because you're going to have your low days and you're going to have your high days, but he's like, I want you to know that through your love for helping people and your passion and stuff like that, he's like, I promise you, you're doing good things, bro. He's like, it may not seem like it, but I promise you, we need people like you and we need people like me, and so ever since he said that, I really try and think about that, especially as I go through these things, is, I'm going to have my good days and I'm going to have my bad days, or my, but as long as I keep the honesty and the passion towards what I'm trying to do, which is to help people and also master my craft, then things will work out. You know, they may not work out tomorrow. They may not work out 10 years from now, but they'll work out because that's just how life works.
So true, man. Tom just said he's a giver's gain. And
Yep.
it's what it's, I think we talk about this stuff a lot, I think, in content in general, where, obviously it comes up a lot, but I think it's cool when to me, it's cool when you're giving and it's behind the scenes and people don't even see it. And then you start to actually see it through the content as well. And you see it. And I know like when we, I like to have a little half-hour phone call before people get on the show, just to get a feel for how people are going to be and whether we're going to be able to interact or how we should interact. And, but it's like I've noticed recently, even just with like invites that I get to podcasts, it's like I've had just invites where it's just like called out of the blue. I'm like, hey, be on my show. And it's like, if I know the person, it's one thing. It's like, yeah, of course. Yeah. But then if I don't, then it's just like, okay, well, I'm not saying like I need like you to tell me how special I am, but it would be cool just to know like why do you want me on there? You know, like what's the value I'm going to bring? And I think when we had the conversation, I just realized automatically, number one, you're super easy to talk to, ton of fun, and like you're out there for the right reasons, and then I'm like, okay, well, this is somebody who I want to be promoting because the whole vision is to rebrand the headhunter, rebrand the recruiter, and so people can see the people who are actually doing things for the right reasons, and that there are recruiters out there that aren't just ghosting people, and if they are, it's unintentional. And so I love it, man. I love it. So where's the best place for people to reach you? Is it just LinkedIn you recommend, or are there any other kind of social media sites that are good to interact with you on?
So I do. So LinkedIn, I've really dove into that. Just because, as we all know, Facebook can get super drowned out by, I love memes. Don't get me wrong. I love memes and funny videos and things like that, or memes, as my wife always jokes. The memes. But, LinkedIn, I can honestly say that in the last 6 months to a year, that has really like grown my soul. Like when it comes to just like learning, like if I find myself on Facebook for too long, I immediately I'm like, nope, it's like LinkedIn. And so just because, like I want to grow my mind, I spend enough time watching stupid shows with my kids, just to spend time with them and watch cartoons. And so, LinkedIn's the best way to kind of get a hold of me. I have a Facebook page and stuff like that, but obviously if I don't know you, I'm probably not going to add you. And so, I mean, it is what it is. We link up on LinkedIn and I talk to you a little bit, kind of the same thing you said. I want to kind of know you a little bit because, even though I don't put anything crazy on my Facebook, that's still, my family and stuff like that on there. Obviously the YouTube.
Are we friends on Facebook?
I added you, but you didn't add me yet. So.
Oh man, I feel like
two of you. There's also two of you on there.
I know. Yeah, there's like. That's my fake. That's my profile. That's my fake profile. I thought for some reason I thought I did. I did add you.
It's so, but LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And then obviously we have a Facebook page for the podcast. The podcast is called Scared Money Don't Make Money. I know I haven't said that once, but people tend to like the title just because it just makes sense. Kind of like. I like yours, the Headhunter Hideout. It's like it flows so easily off the tongue, and then Scared Money Don't Make Money. It's just another one of those, I would say, homage things to what's the worst they're going to say? No.
Dude, love it.
And so, and it's funny because it was just a phrase that we said. We always just joked about it. We were like, we talked about when you work. Honestly, it came from when we were talking about working with applicants who honestly were hard to work with, whether they be qualifications were hard to get them in the military or their scores were low or something, there's something that most recruiters would just step away from. And, me and Roy would be like, hey man, scared money don't make money. Like we can't get people in, in these positions if we're just going for the safe bets all the time. And 100%. So, and that's what's made us both very successful is that, kind of in essence, that phrase. So that's what we call the show.
Well, Rob goes, oof. So I don't know whether that's like a oof. Yeah. It's good or bad, but I love it, man. I love that it's just in line with who you are as well. And I would highly recommend anybody who's out there that isn't connected to Cameron, just connect with him on LinkedIn. may send him a little message just saying saw you on the show. And I've been asking this question a lot in closing, and it's kind of becoming my my go-to now. But I think it's great for this situation because you're kind of in this situation in some ways. But what would be your advice to somebody who is just starting out, and it could be starting out in recruiting, could be starting out maybe even with a podcast. Maybe we let's talk about the podcast. What's the one piece of advice that you would give somebody if they're starting out a podcast and they want to get somebody on, or they don't know where to start? What's your big advice for them?
On just kind of like what you said earlier was, what's the vision? What are you trying to gain from it? If it's just this, if it's just like, actually, I had a friend that hit me up the other day and she said, I want to start a blog. And I said, oh, cool, that's cool. Like, what's your blog going to be about? And she said, well, I kind of wanted to start a blog because I need a side hustle. I need to make some money. And I said, don't do a blog. I just told her flat out. I said, don't even do it. She's like, well, why? And I said, cause like, you're not going to care, because then if you don't make any money in a week, then you just did all this work for no reason. And I was like, if you're going to do, I was like, well, she's like, but you started your podcast. I said, but the podcast wasn't bred out of trying to make money. The podcast was bred out of passion, bro, because I love recruiting, and I said, do something that you're passionate about. I was like, you like barbecuing, do something. Maybe, if you did a blog about barbecuing, then maybe, because that's what you love to do. But so the biggest thing is, I think would see really nail down what the point of it all is, and then don't be afraid to reach out. I have preached that since the day I became a recruiter. Everyone needs to stop being so afraid to just call somebody and say, I don't know how to do this, or I'm not good at this. Can you help me be better?
Love it, man. Yeah. Love it. That's great. It's great advice. And I think it does tie into recruiting. It's the same thing with recruiting. I say, if you want to learn how to do recruiting or learn an industry, literally just got to call up people and have conversations. And it could be, you want to learn about construction, find a construction site,
exactly,
talk to a couple of the workers, be like, oh, who do you report into? Figure out the structure. It's just, you learn through conversation, and you learn from approaching it in a place of humility and saying, I don't know this, but I want to learn. I think you could teach me. And people, they want to teach. So I love that. And Rob gave us some clarification. He said the Facebook friends part. So I added you now. So
oof. Thank you, Rob.
I figured it was something probably that I said and not what you said. So
I would
awesome
say
stuff, man. Oh yeah.
So last thing I will say, so about the whole, like, asking people to help. So like, I know, and I don't know, maybe you can elaborate real quick on the civilian sector, how this would go over. But when I was doing health professions recruiting for the military, I'm not a health professional. I am not a doctor. And so whenever I was recruiting people, I would ask my candidates. I'd be like, hey, look, I'm an expert at the recruiting process. Why don't you explain to me how your hospital works, or explain to me what your school was like? What were some of the hardships you went through? What are some of the things you think I can do to really help people like yourself? And it was amazing at how great the response was from that. Is that, because one, it comes off genuine, right? Because I genuinely want to know. And two, it's like, it's just real. I'm not I think too many people expect them to be experts, when in reality, you're an expert at this. It's okay that while you're recruiting these different people, to ask them for their advice. And honestly, it turns it more into a relationship rather than just a business transaction as well, because now they feel a part of it, a part of the, the process, right? Because they're like, oh, okay, now my recruiter is more informed to help me. And then hopefully we can work together to make something happen.
I mean, it completely crosses over into the civilian sector. Yeah. I mean, I think, to me, I always tell people, like, you want to come off like something. You
can't be completely clueless.
Yeah, you can't be like, I've never done this before. You could actually be that honest at the start, but I just tell people, like, you could be recruited for 20 years, let's say, in construction, because that's what I did. It's like you could be in recruiting for 20 years in construction, and you've never seen like an architect drawing, and you don't know how, you don't know anything about plumbing or electrical, but you understand the concepts. But it's that curiosity, and it's caring. And I think one of the things it does is people like to share about themselves. And so if you're like, hey, I really want to learn from you right now. But I think that to me, that's actually the biggest skill of just anyone who's in recruiting. Like, if you don't have curiosity and you don't know how to ask questions, it doesn't matter if you're good at sales. It's like you've got to be better asking questions. And on top of that, asking questions in a way that person knows that you want to actually find out from them. So it's that's exactly what it is. And that's probably the best advice that I think you could give anyone is just ask those questions, learn, and, you know, just treat people like they're the expert. Because even if you have been doing it for 20 years, you don't know anything. It's like you could do IT recruiting. Unless you're in IT before, you're not doing any coding. You know, it doesn't matter if you know what the term means. You're not doing any of it. So I love it, man. Well, I don't want to take any much more time here. I know we've been on for about 45 minutes. So I just am so thankful that you were able to come on. It's great. Really appreciate just what you bring to the platform. What you bring is just a human, man. I'm excited to connect with you on Facebook as well. And thing I'm most excited about is just seeing, number one, how the podcast progresses, but just how the business progresses as well. And anything I can do to promote you, just let me know. And appreciate it, man. Yeah. So we'll, if you just hang on here, I'm going to end the broadcast, and appreciate everybody who's out there. So Rob, Tom, Ryan stopped in as well, Gina, Newman, and Alfaya. We just appreciate all you guys, and anyone else who's out there. Appreciate your time. And we'll see you on Friday here for another episode. So I'm going to end this broadcast right